afternoon, everyone. I'm Tanya, founder of Finlit for Teens, and thank you all for joining us today. So just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. The session is being recorded, so please make sure that you stay on mute. And if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, and that's where we'll be answering them at the end. So let's get into it. So with Finlit for Teens, my main goal is to provide information on the basics of financial literacy with content that's simple, bite-sized, and easy to consume. And so for today's session, we have a very special guest speaker whose story I'm really inspired by. She graduated college with 3 degrees, with no debt and no student loans. And so this is something that really resonated with me, especially when we look at all these alarming statistics of teens who aren't financially educated to make smart decisions for college and later have to end up paying off all their student loans long after they've graduated. And so I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. She's founder of AJ Moneycoach, Miss Alise Jackson. And she's here to talk to us today about tips and tricks to avoid getting trapped into debt and student loans and how to make financially smart decisions. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Miss Alise.
Hi, yes, Tanya. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to get into this subject. I hope you and your followers will find this interesting and useful and save you from being some of those statistics that you talk about, for sure. So just a quick intro about myself, and you may want to know, who is AJ Moneycoach. So like Tanya said, my name's Alise. I'm a certified financial coach, and AJ Moneycoach is the name of my financial coaching business. Prior to doing financial coaching full-time, I spent many years in the accounting profession, accounting and finance, which is actually what I majored in college. And I left that career to finally launch my financial coaching business full-time. And what a financial coach is and what a financial coach does is it's someone who helps you increase your financial literacy and build strong financial habits. Is someone who listens, who educates, who really understands their client's situation and instills hope in them and can guide them and provide accountability along their financial journey, no matter where they are. So in other words, I help people tackle their money issues with dignity and integrity. So why we're here today? We're here today to start thinking about how to pay for college, right? And how to do it without going into debt. Because graduating college and starting your adult life deeply in debt is just one of the worst possible situations you can get yourself into. And so you might be thinking, well, what can I do now? And if you're in high school now, or you have teens who are in high school and you're wondering, what should we be doing? You know, people are talking to you about keeping grades up and taking the SAT or the ACT, but maybe not talking about how to pay for college. So if you have parents or a family member, or you are a family member who has saved up for college with maybe a 529 plan or an educational savings account or some other way, that is a wonderful gift and you should be very happy about that. But if you're not in that situation, that's okay too. I don't want you to panic, because there are some other things that you can do to help get yourself headed in the right direction right now. And one of these things that you can do is, while you're still in high school, you can look into what are called dual enrollment classes. Many high schools offer these, or you can even find them online now with a lot of the education going online. You can be a great way to get some of these classes under your belt for college credit. So you can take them while you're still in high school, and you can start knocking off some of your general education college credits at the same time. And what that can do is a couple of things. One, it can reduce the amount of time that you're actually paying for college tuition or at a university. And the other thing that it can do is it can kind of give you a glimpse into some of the subjects that may, pique your interest, maybe something that you enjoy and that you might want to study further down the road. And along with that, you can start thinking about what does interest you. and start doing some research into those fields of study. So even when you're still in high school, you may think, gosh, I'd like to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or an oceanographer or whatever, and start really researching those career fields, and maybe try to find people to talk to in those fields and ask them questions about what their day-to-day job really looks like. Can you visit them at their job or ask them about what it looks like? Because you want to start thinking about what's a field of study that you can do that can actually yield you a job when you graduate. That's really the goal of going to college, right? Is to get an education that can get you a job that you enjoy and that hopefully pays well once you graduate. Okay? So let's take a look at a couple of those student loan statistics and myths and some of the things that Tanya referenced ahead at the beginning of this. So number one is that currently Americans owe more than 1.5 trillion with a T dollars in student loan debt. That is an astonishing number. I mean, that's just hard to even wrap your head around. And the average college graduate today leaves school with over $37,000 in student loan debt, and really with no idea on how much that's really going to cost them. And why I say that is that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but because you took out $37,000 in student loan with interest and things like that, it's going to cost a lot more than that to pay back in the long run. So some of the myths out there, one of the myths out there you may hear people say is, well, student loans can get forgiven once you start working. And the fact of the matter is that the student loan forgiveness program it's pretty sketchy, to put it lightly. There are some programs out there where you can work in public service for a number of years, like as a teacher or in social work. You have to sometimes work in those fields for 10 years, and then you can apply to try to get your loans forgiven. But what tends to happen is a lot of people end up not qualifying for that due to some fine print in the contract that they didn't really understand. And so what they've done is they've spent maybe the 10 years of their career working in a job that maybe they did or maybe they didn't want, maybe didn't pay them as much as they could have been paid elsewhere, thinking that their student loans were going to get forgiven, only to find out that they're not. And the actual data shows that less than 1.5% of people who apply for student loan forgiveness actually get them granted. So that is pretty low odds there. It's not something you want to bank on for your future. And myth number two is another one I tend to hear a lot. And people say, well, I don't have to make the payments until after I graduate. And when I graduate, I'll have a great paying job and it'll be easy to repay. And the truth of the matter with that is that depending on the type of student loan you take, even though you're not required to make the payments while you're in school, the interest could still be accruing right away from the time you take them. Meaning you could have loans that you take out at the beginning of your freshman year of university, and you might not have to pay it back until 6 months after you graduate. So you're thinking, well, that's at least 4.5 years away. But that loan could be accruing interest for those 4.5 years. And so by the time you graduate, that loan is a huge number higher than you were expecting it to be. And you can actually end up owing more on the loan than you thought you were taking out by the time you've got to start making payments. And then what happens if you don't get a great paying job right away and you're required to make those payments? Because there's, the economy is a little crazy right now. You just don't know what's going to happen. So you're setting yourself up for a point where you suddenly graduate and like 6 months later, you have to start making these big payments, and you just can't predict if you're going to be able to afford that. Okay. So you came here to find out how I did it, right? 3 times. So how I graduated college 3 times student loan debt free. Well, no, I did not have wealthy parents. I also didn't come from a family that saved up for my college education. I was actually the first person in my family to graduate college. So honestly, I don't think they really even knew to save for college or how to go about it, even if they had the means to. But I always knew that I wanted to graduate college. And so when I was in high school, I started thinking, how am I going to pay for this? And I had been babysitting probably since the age of 12 to earn money, but that didn't really cut it. And I got my first quote unquote real part-time job in retail at TJ Maxx when I was 16 years old. And that kind of started my working life. So keep in mind, as I share my story here, that it's just that. It's my story. You don't have to follow the same path. There are other ways to accomplish the same feat. This is just how I did it. So let's talk about degree number 1, an Associate of Arts or an AA degree. So the first step in a 4-year degree is getting your general education requirements out of the way. And these are the required curriculum or classes before you get into the courses for your major or your area of study. And you have to complete these no matter where you go to school. These are things like, a math class, an English class, some sort of history class, same types of things you have to do in high school, right? But at the college level. And you have to complete these no matter where you go. So for me, I chose to go to a local 2-year college, or a community college, it may be called in some places. Community college tuition is a fraction of the tuition of 4-year universities. And there's also likely one near your current town, no matter where you live. Just to give you some framework here, tuition at a 2-year community college is on average about 1/3 that of an in-state public 4-year university. And it's about 1/10 of the tuition of a private university. So we're talking some big bucks there, big bucks. And generally at these types of institutions, you don't live in dorms or even on campus. So for my first year there, I lived at home with my family. And eventually I moved into a shared apartment, but I didn't live in dorms or on campus at all. That saved some money for sure. The other thing I did is I chose to work full-time in my retail job, where I had the ability to work some nights and some weekends to get enough hours in while not interfering with my class times. And so how I did this is that I generally scheduled my college classes for 2 full days a week. Like I chose either all classes that met on Mondays and Wednesdays, or maybe a different semester, I chose all classes that met on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then those were my days off of work. And I devoted those 2 days to school, and in between classes I could study, or those nights I could study. And then I worked the rest of the days. Was it a tough schedule? Yeah, but I was young, I had a lot of energy and I really wanted to do it. And I think that's what makes retail or food service or those types of jobs really good for this type of schedule, because they're generally open on weekends or later into the evenings. And so you can work some additional hours outside of school hours. And I actually started, I told you I took my first job with TJ Maxx, and then my junior year of high school, I started working for Pier 1, another retailer, and they offered a pretty great tuition reimbursement program once I started college. What they did is they would pay for 75% of my tuition and books as long as I maintained A's and B's in my classes. And so I was required to submit my transcript each semester and get a reimbursement from them. So that meant I had to float my first semester. I had to have the money up front, but I had saved up some money from my job. And once I got that first reimbursement, then I could just use that money to pay for most of the next semester, and kept it going along. And then I funded the remaining 25% with the earnings that I had from working. Okay. And I finished my Associate of Arts degree, including all of my general education courses, in 2 years. All right. So let's move on to degree number 2. So now that my AA was done, it was time to finish up the coursework for my Bachelor of Science degree. And by that time, I had decided to major in accounting. I had taken an accounting course in high school and I really loved it. And then I took a couple more during the pursuit of my associate's degree. And I knew it was what I wanted to do. And I also knew that it was a place or a profession that I could get a job in that paid fairly decently coming right out of college. And so what I did at that point is I transferred to an in-state public university. And let me repeat that, in-state public university. And why I'm emphasizing that is that in-state is going to equal lower tuitions for residents than paying as an out-of-state student. So you see, maybe see the little logo here. I lived in California at the time. I transferred to California State University, San Marcos. And they are a public university, means they're state funded versus a private university. Private universities are much, much, much more expensive. And for example, in California, the California State University system has, I believe, 23 campuses spread out across the state. And your state may have similar types of institutions that have multiple campuses in different parts of the state that you could possibly attend. During the time I was a student there, I, again, did not live in dorms or on campus. I lived in a shared apartment that was nearer to my job than it was to the school. And what that meant was that rent was a little more reasonable because rent was more expensive in a college town or near a college town. And so it meant that the 2 days a week that I had my classes, I had to drive a little further to get to school. But the 5 days a week that I worked, I was closer to my job where I lived, and I could pay a little bit less in rent. And again, I lived in a shared apartment, so I wasn't paying for everything 100%. And I continued to work full time for Pier 1. In fact, I worked there all the way through getting my bachelor's degree. So from my junior year of high school until I graduated with my bachelor's degree, because they had such an awesome tuition reimbursement plan. And I really liked the job too, but it was hard to walk away from them paying 75% of my tuition. And I continued to fund the remaining 25% from my earnings from my job. And so I graduated with my bachelor's degree 4 years after graduating high school, but I only spent 2 years at the university after spending 2 years at community college. And one of the things I like to point out, because people have asked me this in the past, is, well, what does your diploma look like, or what does your degree look like? Well, my diploma doesn't look any different than the one of somebody who spent 4 years or more at the university paying all the extra money, right? My degree is from the university. It doesn't have any distinction that I did 2 years at a community college and then transferred versus somebody who spent the full 4 years at the university. So that's kind of something important that I like to point out. Okay, so degree number 3. This is where things took a little bit of a turn. I took a little bit of a break here, and I chose not to go to grad school immediately after finishing my bachelor's degree for a couple of reasons. One, grad school can be very, very expensive. And even with a 75% tuition reimbursement plan, it could still be pretty expensive. Plus, I just finished my bachelor's degree, and I really wanted to get started on my career. And so I took a bit of a break, and I got a job in my field of accounting that I had majored in, and I got myself some practical career experience before I decided to pursue my MBA. And what this did was it allowed me some time to work my way up the corporate ladder a little bit. It allowed me to take advantage of the point in your career where your salary generally increases fairly rapidly when you first are starting out. And so when it came time for me to return to school, I selected an online degree program, which is what worked for me with my work schedule and my responsibilities. And there's other options out there for working professionals. There's night programs and weekend programs. For me, I chose to take a 100% online program. And by this time, I lived in my own house. So again, no on-campus living expenses or anything like that. I was living in my own home at the time. And I was obviously continuing to work full-time. I was now working in my career field versus a retail job. And I continued to select companies to work for that provided tuition benefits to their employees. And at the time I decided to start working on my master's, I was working for an educational institution. And so they were very supportive of offering financial assistance to their employees that were pursuing degrees in higher education, right? In fact, I took this job probably 6 months before I started my master's program. And one of the main reasons that I took the job was because they were an educational institution and they were going to subsidize 100% of the tuition for their employees. I only had to pay for my books, and that was huge, 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 huge. So I jumped right on that. I did the program and I finished it in about 20 months, I guess, is what it took me to finish. And again, my online degree diploma does not look any different than the diploma of someone who attended the same school in a brick or mortar campus. It doesn't say asterisk online, right? These programs are very, very popular now and can provide very great educational options as long as you're kind of a self-starter and can handle working on, with remote work groups and things like that. But it's kind of how we're all doing things now. So it should be an option for anybody. Okay, so that's my story. And you may have caught on to 3 common things that I kind of said over and over that I did during the pursuit of all of my degrees. And so these are what I look back on as kind of the secrets to success and staying out of debt during college. 1, I never lived in dorms or on campus. I started out living at home with my family, then into a shared apartment, and then later, by the time I was in grad school, in my own home. I worked full-time, meaning at least 32 to 40 hours a week during my entire educational career, I should call it, right? And then the one people just don't think about a lot is I specifically looked for jobs or companies that offered tuition assistance or tuition reimbursement programs for their employees. And, you can find this information out online about companies. And even during an interview phase, it is perfectly acceptable to ask if that's a benefit that they provide to their employees. And so what I've thrown up here is names of a few companies that we probably all recognize. And these are ones that all currently offer pretty good tuition assistance programs for their employees. So Home Depot, Target, Starbucks, Bank of America, Verizon Wireless, Lowe's, Walmart, like a lot, Chick-fil-A, a lot of these companies have very good tuition reimbursement programs and incentives for their employees. And some of them even offer it for part-time employees as well, which is fantastic. That wasn't an option I ran into when I was going, but that's not to say that there weren't companies that were offering it then, but for sure now there are. And so, you can just go out to Google and say, companies that offer tuition assistance 2020, and find a whole list of companies and then kind of dig a little deeper into what they offer. And maybe if you're looking for a part-time job or a full-time job while you're going to school or in the summers, those are companies you may want to target that can help you out tremendously with some tuition dollars. Okay. So maybe you like the way I did it. Maybe you don't think that that's the right way for you. That's totally fine. This is your journey. This is your college career. So I've kind of talked to some other people and put together a list of other ways to find money for school without taking on debt. And these are things that I didn't do, honestly, because I didn't know to do some of them. Like looking back, I kind of wish I would have done some of these too. I might not have had to work as much, or I could have saved a little more of my money. But I just didn't learn about them until it was too late. So number 1 is to fill out your FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And you want to do this to see if you qualify for any grants, but this is also the same form that you can use to qualify for loans. So I kind of put up there, use it to see if you qualify for grants. Grants are free money, not loans that you have to pay back. Some grants are what they call needs-based, meaning they're based on your income or your parents' income if you're a dependent of your parents. So not everybody is going to qualify. For me, I likely could have qualified for some because by my second year of college, I was living on my own and supporting myself on a pretty low income. I just didn't know about it at the time, honestly. And so I kind of missed out on probably some free money there. Number 2 is apply for scholarships. And scholarships, I think people think immediately of sports scholarships or academic scholarships. And those are great. If you play a sport, if you have very good grades, you absolutely should apply for scholarship money and try to get some money there. But there are also some crazy scholarships out there that nobody's ever heard of. There is a statistic out there that every year students leave over $3 billion in unclaimed grant and scholarship money on the table. Like $3 billion that somebody wants to give kids for college and they're not taking it. I mean, there's scholarships for like people who drink Dr. Pepper, for people whose great grandparents worked in the coal mine. I mean, just really random things. So, you know, again, get on Google and just look up scholarships, you know, talk to your parents. Maybe the company your parents work for offers scholarships for children of employees. Maybe if they belong to any clubs or organizations, or you do, there might be scholarships out there. Just ask, Google, just see what's out there. There's some crazy things out there. And some of them you might come across and you're like, oh, that's a $200 scholarship. That's not going to pay for anything. Well, guess what? If you apply and get a bunch of those and you start having some $200 and $500 checks rolling in for school, that can add up pretty quickly and really help you out. So that's another thing I just didn't know to do. I thought, well, I'm not a varsity athlete and yeah, my grades are okay, but I'm going to community college. I don't need a scholarship. I just really didn't understand what that meant. And I really, looking back, wish I would have done some of that. Okay. So another thing you can do is to look into work-study programs at your college or university. Sometimes if you're looking to work anyway and you can take on a part-time job at the college that you're going to, you can qualify for some pretty good tuition discounts. For example, like if you worked at the library or in the science lab or something like that, you may be able to get reduced tuition or even some free tuition. And if you do choose to live in the dormitories because you want that experience, that's absolutely fine. By your second year, you can apply to be what's called a resident advisor. It's sort of like the cruise director / rules enforcer for the floor of your dorm room, right? And being an RA can get you free or discounted room and board, which is actually a pretty expensive part of the college experience. And my younger sister actually did this. She was a resident advisor while she was in college living in the dorms, and it helped her, you know, offset some of those college costs and helped her out. Okay. And then last but not least, number 4 is joining the military. And this certainly isn't for everyone, but it can be a great benefit if you're somebody who has already thought about or is willing to serve our country. Education assistance can happen in a few different ways here. One is by attending one of the service academies for college. So that's like the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy or the Army Academy. And these are kind of hard to get into. So if you are accepted into them, you will get a really good education, military-based college experience in exchange for a service commitment to serve our country, usually a period of about 6 years or so after you graduate. Another way is to just join the military and start your service, and then you can become eligible for tuition assistance programs while you remain in service. Or if you complete your term of service, which is usually a 4-year term, you can qualify for what's called the GI Bill. And once you separate, you can use the GI Bill to go back to college, finish college, go pursue a new degree, things like that. My husband, for example, was in the military. And when he separated, he used the GI Bill, and he already had his bachelor's degree at the time. So he used his GI Bill to pay for his master's program after he left the military. So it is a great option out there. But again, that's a very personal decision. And then there's other programs you may know through your high school, like ROTC programs, and a high school counselor or a military recruiter can provide some more information about those types of programs. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Miss Alise. That was an awesome presentation. I love all the key takeaways. Those are like great points of consideration for, the audience thinking about college planning or even just generally financially. So let's open it up for some Q&A now. But before we start, there is a link to a survey in the chat. So if you guys could just go and fill that out, it's a very quick survey. I would really appreciate that. So I had some questions that were submitted to me through the chat. The first one is, you mentioned dual enrollment classes as you can take as a student in high school. What are your thoughts on AP classes?
So I was an AP student when I was in high school. I did take AP classes. I'm not sure if things have changed much. When I went AP classes, I did not get college credit for them. They were just considered advanced placement to help me maybe move into higher level courses once I started college, but I didn't get any actual college credit for them. Now you may be able to speak, or somebody else may be able to speak if things have changed then. Dual enrollment is more something you can take that you actually get your college credits for.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's an interesting point about AP. We'll definitely look into that. The next question we have is, what are your thoughts on taking a semester off college to work full-time and save up more money?
So I think that you have to plan your college experience based on your financial position and your family's financial position. So if you're in a position like I was, where you didn't have college savings, you didn't have, an athletic scholarship or a full ride scholarship, or wealthy parents who are going to just cash flow your college education, that might have absolutely been an option for me. I was very fortunate to find a job that I could work and I could handle going to school at the same time and use that money. But yeah, absolutely. If you have the opportunity to work and you can really sock away some money, like you're still living at home and you can just sock away some money for a year, I absolutely don't see any issue with that. So many people go to college right out of high school and spend 6 or 7 years there until they graduate anyway. So I actually think if you took a year off, worked, socked up some money to pay for it, and then graduated in 4 years, you may still finish faster than some of the students who went right out of school. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, it all kind of depends on the situation.
And you have to know your motivation as well. Like, right. You have to know that I'm just going to do this for a year and then I'm going to enroll next year, and not get kind of caught up in the working life and not go back if your intention is to go.
Right. Our last question is, in college, do you think having a side hustle is worth it?
A side hustle. So, I mean, to me, that's a job, right? So to me, that's no different than me having a retail job or something else. So if you, I guess, what is your side hustle? Are you, driving for Uber? That's a job. Have you taken real estate courses and you're selling some real estate on the side? Yeah, great. That's a job. Pay for it. You want to be mindful that you know yourself well enough to know what your study habits are, how much time you need to devote to studying, keeping your grades up. Because if you're paying for tuition and you're trying to work on a side hustle or a part-time job or a full-time job, and your grades are slipping and you're flunking out of school anyway, you're not helping anybody here, right? So you're paying for money and you're not even completing the program, or you're, whatever. So again, it's a very personal thing. You have to know yourself. You have to know your work habits, your study habits, and your time management skills. But absolutely, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm a fan of working during college. I know not everybody is, but
Yeah.
I think it's way better than graduating and having $40,000 worth of debt staring you in the face and thinking, wow, this is great. So even if I get a job that pays me $50,000 a year, I am still going to be paying this back for the next 10 years plus of my life. I can't even enjoy the money I'm making or start investing it or saving for a house or whatever you want to do, right? Because you're stuck paying back all this money that you borrowed.
Right. Yeah. And you brought up a really good point on, it's really important that you maintain that balance with whatever you're doing and studying and extracurriculars. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have left today for questions. But I want to thank you so much, Miss Alise, for coming here and speaking to us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And if you could just do me a favor and go check out Miss Alise's Facebook, Instagram, website, and LinkedIn page. She has awesome content on all things finance, and I'm sure you guys are going to love it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tanya. It was a pleasure to have you, be on here with you. Thank you.
You too. Bye. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.